So you believe that Donald Trump could be a Russian asset recruited long time ago by the Russian security services?
There are strong allegations about this. I have no particular view of it, but of course I read what is there. And given Trump's lifestyle and that he has been in Moscow repeatedly and in connection with women, it would be very surprising if the Russians don't have sex films with him. These are standard procedures in Russia that put people in embarrassing situation and film them. So it would be very surprising if they don't have that on Trump.
Let's also cover Donald Trump's tariffs. US President Trump says that he is applying a 90-day pause on new tariffs against all countries except China. At the same time, he announced that he was raising tariff rates on China to 125%. What are the consequences of such decision of Donald Trump, and what could be the reason of his U-turn, of his reversal of such tariffs?
Let me start with his idea of tariffs to begin with. There's no basis for it whatsoever. Trump is talking about trade balance and trade balance only. The US has a negative trade balance, but it has a huge positive service balance. If you add them together, you get the current account balance, which is negative, but not enormously so. Why is it negative? Because the US saves too little and lives on resources of other countries. So it's not other countries that are taking advantage of the US, it's the US that is taking advantage of other countries. Foreign investment in US securities, stocks and bonds are currently $32 trillion, while the US GDP is $28 trillion. So it's far more. And the reason why the US needs so much money is that it has a huge budget deficit, more than 6% of GDP each year, and has accumulated a public debt of 100% of GDP, which needs to be financed, and foreigners are financing this. So rather than being robbed by foreigners, the US has benefited from the benevolence of the foreigners. So, and then Trump wants to increase tariffs sharply. What he did now is that he increased the tariffs to 24% after previously 2.5%, which is normal in the West. And he did so for no reason whatsoever. And the cost of this is enormous. Most of all, the US is being hit, but also the whole rest of the world. For example, the World Trade Organization revised its forecast for global growth this year from plus 3% to minus 1%. And the guilty person here is one man, Donald Trump, who has started this mad trade war for no reason whatsoever, only that he is completely ignorant and has an extremely bad temper, and most of all dislikes Western countries. As he says, our allies are often worse than our enemies, so who are not Trump's enemies. And what happened now was that the crisis that Trump had been instigated simply became too severe, so that he had to stop. And some people with economic sense managed to inform him that if this continued, US could get into a default situation because of his sheer madness. And they managed then to stop it. It's still 10%. It's a 4 times higher tariff than before, which is a serious impediment to the economic development. But of course, it's not 24%. And then, as a fig leap, Trump continues fighting China. So we'll see how bad the situation will continue, but the crisis is not over. The crisis, the main world crisis today, has a simple name: Donald Trump.
Also, the US economy still faces a significant risk of recession even after Trump's decision on reversal for these tariffs, according to Goldman Sachs. Also, in a note to clients this afternoon, Goldman Sachs economists projected the US economy will grow at a very slow pace of just 0.5% in this year. Do you believe that this decision of Donald Trump to reverse his tariffs will not be enough to change the situation dramatically, to return to this situation before Trump's decision on tariffs?
I don't think that it's enough. I think that the U.S. is likely to have negative growth this year, and we are now also seeing that the U.S. and the U.S. dollar are no longer seen as safe havens. People put their money in Switzerland, Japan, Europe, even China, rather than in the U.S. now. And the U.S. dollar has fallen so far this year. And what was particularly noticeable was that there was a sell-off of U.S. treasuries rather than purchases of U.S. treasuries, showing that some investors are really worried about the sustainability of U.S. public finances in the longer run. So I think that the U.S. will be in crisis as long as Trump is president. And this is a very serious situation. And an additional element here is that Trump loves chaos. He loves uncertainty. But business wants certainty and stability. And these are the things that Trump hates. He wants everything to float, wants everything to be dependent on him. And as you can see now, all newspapers all over the world have Trump and his policies on the first page every day. That's what Trump really loves, being the first person on the news page all the time. And of course, this will mean that the U.S. will lose all authority, if it hasn't lost it already. And the big problem that we need to face up to is Donald Trump. The natural thing would be that he gets impeached a third time, and that a big part of the Republican Party really moves with him. But the Republican Party in the United States now have become a personality cult, or if it's not a personality cult, then it is Republicans that are so afraid of Trump, because he's quite vicious when he goes after somebody, and therefore they dare not oppose him. So the precarious situation remains. And the best that can happen for Ukraine is that he doesn't have time to pay attention to Ukraine.
And also, from your perspective, you just mentioned that Republicans are afraid of Donald Trump. What are the chances for Donald Trump to be impeached by the Congress after these developments, or can he face any kind of consequences?
For the time being, it's very difficult to see anything that can come up. If there are still democratic elections in the U.S. next year, we have a midterm election scheduled for November 2026. And the Republicans, as it looks now, would presumably lose majority in both houses of Congress. But that's far too early to predict. So much will happen before that.
Let's also cover interesting development about the Russian oil prices during this big trade war. Urals crude oil fell to $52 approximately per barrel at the Baltic port of Primorsk last week. Do you believe that this big trade war between the US and China could reduce prices on Russian oil?
Yes, I think that the global oil price will fall. And we have now seen that OPEC is producing more oil. Trump wants to produce more oil. I don't think that will have any impact in the US, but the important factor is that Trump is likely to cause a global recession. If there's a global recession, the oil price will be low. So it's most of all market forces that work here. But that means that Russia will have much smaller resources to pursue its war against Ukraine.
And can this convince Vladimir Putin to at least take a pause in this war, to accept full ceasefire because of this situation with reduced oil prices?
I think that Putin likes war. It helps him to stay in power. It gives him some legitimacy. He's not doing anything for the Russian people. Then it's, at least he can say that as Ivan the Terrible, he is collecting Russian lands, and Russian or not. But I think for Putin, it's better with a bad war than with a good peace. So therefore, I think that Putin will be against any ceasefire or at least most kinds of ceasefire. Of course, there are ceasefires that are more harmful to Ukraine than to Russia, but it will make it more difficult for him to pursue the war. Ukraine needs financing and money and technology to win the war.
And also, let's cover our final topic, the trade war between the US and China. Chinese officials say that they will fight to the end. Also, the economist predicts that China's leaders believe they could win this trade war against the United States. Don't you think that China has more chances to win this trade war?
Since Trump doesn't know what he's doing, he's unlikely to win anything. And he's like the school bully who gradually grows up, and all of a sudden the other kids have become more sensible, so they don't accept the bully any longer. What Trump is doing is that he's isolating the United States, while China is trying to keep all doors to the rest of the world open. There's no general trend towards protectionism in the world. It's Trump that is pushing protectionism in the US. And in the US, protectionism is much easier to accept because it's, after all, 1/4 of a global economy. So the US can do a lot internally and doesn't feel as dependent on foreign trade as virtually all other countries in the world. So what I see is that we have a ever freer market in the rest of the world, and then we have the US, where Trump is drawing up the bridges and isolating the economy, and obvious victims here will be the big US high-tech companies. Apple produces 90% of its iPhones in China. Now they will become excessively expensive, so this will be a devastating blow to Apple. And it looks similar with many other of the big US companies. It's US companies that will suffer from Trump's policies as long as he will be allowed to pursue these highly detrimental economic policies. And as long as Trump devastates the US, also think of his anti-immigration policy. He wants to deport 240,000 Ukrainian political refugees here. and he is going after science and the research and the big universities. Trump hates everything that is modern, everything that is after 89, after the 1890s is wrong in his view. Car production is the most modern that he at all talks about, apart from cryptocurrency that he loves because that is good for money laundering. So this is a completely unsustainable situation in the US, and therefore China is unfortunately likely to benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Åslund, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. Slava Ukraini.